For 3 decades, Johnny Carson carried America from bedtime laughter into midnight calm. The grin looked effortless, the wit automatic, the feeling like old friends catching up. Yet those who knew him best say that when the applause faded and the studio lights cooled, Johnny kept a quiet ledger, private notes on guests who, in his view, weren't just temperamental, but troubling. Over time, he became more candid in private. An actress who seemed fragile and sweet on the couch allegedly reduced a young production assistant to tears so quickly that security stepped in. A celebrated male star was caught in a dressing room moment so unsettling, Johnny nearly called the police. These were not ordinary prima donnas. To Carson, they were bullies and manipulators, protected by the machinery of fame and the politeness of live television. Ahead, a tie grab that froze a studio, a cross-examination in front of millions, and a magic act that quietly hijacked the clock. So here are the guests Johnny Carson couldn't stand. Frank Sinatra, the charming bully Carson saw through. On screen, Johnny and Sinatra looked like old pals. The stories, the easy charm, the occasional song. Off-camera, Carson reportedly hated what he saw. Not the artistry, he respected that, but the behavior when Sinatra thought no one important was watching. If he didn't sing, he'd be an enforcer, Johnny once told a friend. And sometimes, I think he was both. 2 moments tell the story: a tie grab that froze the studio, and a quiet booking cap that said everything. Crew members dreaded the tension that trailed Sinatra's entourage, 6 to 8 men who didn't look like showbiz handlers, so much as people you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. They didn't bustle, they hovered. They spread across the Burbank hallways with the studied casualness of surveillance, eyes on doors, people, clocks. A cameraman later said it felt like the studio was being audited by fear. Even the countdown clock became a battlefield. A floor manager gives the standard 3-minute warning. Sinatra yanks him by the tie, nose to nose. Nobody tells me I've got 3 minutes. I go on when I'm ready. The veteran, tough as they come, went pale. In the control room, the air thinned. Johnny watched on his monitor, jaw set, already halfway to canceling. When a producer murmured one word, ratings, Carson exhaled, straightened his cuffs, and did the job. He always did. Cancellations became folklore. Not a polite call the day before. Vanishing acts. Once he reportedly reached the building, decided he wasn't in the mood, and left. That triggers a domino line of rewrites. Bumped comics, reblocked music, and union overtime. You explain at 2 a.m. The audience never knew. Johnny never let them. What finally turned Carson cold wasn't just power, it was contempt. During a break in the early 70s, Sinatra made a loud crack about a female staffer's looks, pitched just high enough to be heard. Johnny broke his usual backstage silence. "We don't talk about my staff that way here. No theatrics. No raised voice. Just winter." When the red light returned, everything looked normal. But the interview had dropped 20 degrees. Questions got shorter. Laughter became punctuation, not conversation. The rule-bending bled into logistics. Sinatra traveled with his own tempo, preferred introductions, musical cues that had to feel a certain way, even suggested camera business. None of that is unusual for a star until suggestions arrive as orders, filtered through men who didn't speak the language of compromise. A talent coordinator recalled being told to clear the corridors so no one would bother Mr. Sinatra between dressing room and stage. Bother in that context meant exist. Carson wasn't allergic to ego. He saw it nightly. He could roll with diva flourishes when they lived in the realm of showmanship. Zaz's orchids, well as theater. That was circus. What he wouldn't abide was intimidation presented as inevitability. Power for power's sake. Sinatra's entourage didn't create chaos. They engineered deference. That was the chokehold. So Johnny drew a line without a speech. "I don't care what his numbers are. Once a year, maximum," he told his producer. For a host who almost never meddled in bookings, that was a siren. Ground rules tightened. Fewer bodies in hallways. Tighter windows. Decisions routed through the Tonight Show desk. If those conditions couldn't be met, the date simply didn't work out. No feud, no headlines, just absence. And yet the paradox remained. When Sinatra sat down and played the part, the television was undeniable. The band leaned in. The audience levitated. Johnny, ever the pro, met the moment. He could separate performance from person for the viewer at home. But when the lights cooled and the door clicked shut, the ledger came back out. Under Sinatra's name, the note never changed. Brilliant on camera, chilling when the camera blinks. Bette Davis, Hollywood's queen of verbal duels. Audiences adored Bette Davis on The Tonight Show. The arched eyebrow, the scalpel wit, stories that made old Hollywood feel gloriously alive. Backstage, the staff braced. She doesn't need a stage, she needs a courtroom, Johnny allegedly told Ed. No one should be cross-examined by Bette Davis without a lawyer. Davis treated the guest couch like a witness stand. If a younger performer, especially another woman, started to land laughs, she'd lean in, cut across, and take back the rhythm. You could watch the calculation in real time, a glance, a pause, then a perfectly timed interruption that snapped the spotlight to her. She didn't just hold the room, she seized it. Pre-show ritual didn't help. According to multiple staff accounts, Davis often requested whiskey in her dressing room, common for the era, but it sharpened an already razor-edged presence. A cue card holder too slow, one sentence, flayed. A makeup tweak she didn't like, bone-dry sarcasm that landed like a gavel. Johnny almost never corrected guests. Here, he did. When Davis started berating a young staffer during rehearsal, he stepped in, quiet, steady. Miss Davis, on this show we speak to everyone with respect, or we don't speak at all. She blinked, recalculated. The red light returned, and so did the charm. That was the dissonance. Johnny revered the work. All About Eve wasn't just a movie to him. It was a master class. With lightweight divas, bad behavior was easy to file under noise. With Davis, the ledger read undeniable brilliance on camera, scorched earth off it. She knew the reputation and wore it like a medal. For years, she openly called herself difficult, framing difficulty as the tax you pay for standards and success. No apology, just a thesis. She took the work seriously. Carson's team had receipts on how formidable she could be in that chair because she kept coming back. A full sit-down in 1983, a bracing Speaks Her Mind turn in 1986, a late career visit in 1988, where the battle-hardened star still commanded the room. The public saw a legend telling war stories, the crew saw the general who'd fought them. Davis also brought something you can't produce in a green room: inevitability. The camera loved her because she never flinched. She'd lob an incendiary opinion, then hold the silence until you moved first. Johnny, the best conversational pilot in late night, sometimes had to glide until the air stopped shaking. Then he'd exhale, half amused, half exhausted. Genius is one thing, cross-examination is another. By the early 80s, the cost-benefit math tipped. After a final difficult appearance, Johnny reportedly said, "That's the last time. Life's too short to be verbally flogged, Oscars or not," and yet the respect never died. Davis built a career by refusing to soften on screen, in contracts, in conversation. That fire made her immortal. It also made her, in Carson's private ledger, a guest you prepared for like weather. On air, unforgettable. Off air, unsustainable. Orson Welles, the genius who played above the rules. Orson Welles was ratings alchemy, the thunderous voice, the mythic anecdotes, the feeling that a whole century of show business had pulled up a chair. Viewers saw a charming titan. Johnny and his crew saw a man convinced ordinary TV gravity didn't apply to him. After one especially trying visit, Carson reportedly muttered, half joke, half verdict, "This wasn't a guest, it was a hostile takeover." The trouble began before Wheels Down. Welles treated pre-interviews like speed bumps, waving off suggested topics as too obvious, then strolling out to spin cathedral-sized stories that bent the clock. He didn't just talk, he performed. Card work with Doc Severance, impromptu bits that turned the set into a parlor for miracles, unforgettable television, and a scheduling nightmare. Roll tape from the mid-70s and you can see the spell take hold. In 1976, Welles leans back, luxuriates in the pauses, lets the story do the breathing, then punctuates it with close-up wizardry. The audience roars, the control room does math. 7 minutes planned, twice that live. When the segment needed heat, he could summon weather. Trading barbs with Robert Blake that same year, he turned a panel into a duel with punchlines, irresistible TV, and a producer's ulcer in the same breath. This wasn't an isolated persona. It was who he was on microphones. Late in life, Welles dominated any table he sat at, set the tone, let everyone else orbit. His final TV appearance on The Merv Griffin Show, October 10, 1985, even opened with a magic trick before easing into memory and philosophy hours before he died at home. The showman to the end. Back in Burbank, Johnny's problem wasn't content. It was control. Carson was a perfectionist about the craft, beats, timing, the invisible hand that keeps live TV breathing. Wells preferred the grand sweep, the unhurried paragraph, the detour that becomes the destination. He'd glide past subtle rap signals, propose a new angle mid-answer, even nudge toward different camera business. Never hostile, just sovereign. Electrifying for viewers, exasperating when two other guests sat cooling under the lights. Crew veterans adapted. On Wells nights, fragile props quietly disappeared. Segment borders loosened. Johnny kept a couple of landing jokes in his pocket in case the runway moved, and with Wells it often did. His charm made time expand. His ego kept it there. Here's the maddening part. The tape was undeniable. The next morning's highlight reels glowed. The card play with Doc, the laughter rolling like surf, the sense that the golden age itself had wandered onto stage one to tell secrets. So Carson split the difference the only way a great ringmaster can. Let the auteur be the auteur on camera. In Johnny's private ledger, Wells is written in bold, genius that makes history on screen, ego that makes chaos off it. The show survived both. The legend, of course, got the applause. If you're enjoying this, hit subscribe for more hidden Hollywood stories. Tell me in the comments, which guest shocked you the most and why? Mickey Rooney, the aging child star who kept crossing the line. Once upon a time, Mickey Rooney didn't just star in movies. He was the movies. Box office king at the turn of the 40s, the irrepressible Andy Hardy, Judy Garland's live wire partner through a run of era-defining hits. The public knew the dynamo. The Tonight Show staff braced for the whirlwind. That's the Rooney paradox in one breath. Tireless showman on stage, off stage, an unpredictable storm that had crews quietly moving breakables. According to multiple staff accounts, boundaries blurred the moment Rooney hit the corridor. Young production assistants swapped assignments when his name went up. Handshakes lingered a beat too long. Questions got too personal. Compliments arrived with undertone. Try to step away and he might hold your wrist for that extra heartbeat past polite. Johnny wasn't prudish, but he kept bright lines about workplace conduct. Rooney, raised in a studio system where charm was currency, seemed genuinely baffled when told the bill had come due. At least 3 times, employees recalled, he took the stage visibly unsteady, slurred words, stories careening. One infamous night, he launched a Judy Garland anecdote that veered toward the unacceptable. Johnny cut him off mid-applause line and turned the wheel. During the break, he asked a producer, half grimace, half shrug, is he drunk, or is this who he is now? For a host who could land any plane, that was saying something. Either way, the line was crossed. When a young actress shared the bill and became the focus of Rooney's running commentary, Carson did something he rarely did. He apologized to her afterward personally. That's not how professionals behave on my show, and it won't happen again. And it didn't, at least not on Johnny's watch. Bookings tapered, windows narrowed. Daytime pre-tapes replaced the live wire of late night. Not a public ban, just a quiet recalibration. And yet here's the twist of the knife. Rooney could be the definition of discipline. In 1979, he roared back to Broadway with Sugar Babies, a burlesque-tinged smash with Ann Miller that ran for 1,200 performances and toured for years, earning major award nominations. Night after night, he hit his marks like a metronome, proof that the same man who created backstage chaos could be clockwork in front of a paying audience. The scale of his life only amplified the contradictions. A career that began in vaudeville and stretched across 10 decades. Marriages tabloid editors could tally like box office receipts. A legend burnished and battered by time. He spoke openly about personal turbulence later in life, even as colleagues marveled at the wattage of his talent. For Johnny, none of that erased the ledger entry. It only explained the velocity. So Carson split the difference the way only a great ringmaster can. On camera, he gave Rooney the room long enough for a laugh, never long enough for a fire. Off camera, he tightened the rein, because in Johnny's house, charisma was welcomed, nostalgia was cherished, and boundaries were non-negotiable. And with Mickey Rooney, you needed all 3 rules written in bold. Zsa Gabor, the diva who ran on her own clock. Zsa Gabor didn't just enter a room, she arrived. The accent like spun sugar, diamonds catching studio light like flashbulbs. That darling, that could flatter or fillet. Depending on the eyebrow it rode in. Audiences adored the act. The Tonight Show crew braced for the invoice. She was a perennial talk show draw, glamour as performance art, and she could purr through stories like someone who had polished her life into a bit. The persona was half the point. 9 marriages, headlines on speed dial, famous for being famous and making it look effortless. Johnny respected good TV, and Zaja was good TV. But behind the curtain, her presence didn't just bend the run of show. It could snap it. If an intro wasn't phrased just so, if a light didn't land at the most flattering angle, the night stalled while producers played diamond polisher. That was the difference Johnny hated. Spectacle he could host, schedules held hostage he could not. Her public persona, 9 husbands. Quips about keeping the house wasn't myth, it was brand, and the brand traveled with her into every studio. The stakes weren't theoretical. By the late 80s, Gabor's volatility was public record. The Beverly Hills traffic stop, the open container, the courtroom theatrics, the slap that became tabloid shorthand. She served time, paid fines, and then stepped back into the spotlight as if scandal were just another costume change. That resilience fed her magnetism and made crews quietly rewrite contingency plans whenever she was on the call sheet. Inside Carson's house, her demands became moving parts. Corridors cleared, timing softened, intros rewritten until they felt like velvet. She could be winsome one minute, immovable the next, refusing to leave the dressing room until a microscopic detail was fixed, then floating onto the set all lashes and laughter as if the last 30 minutes hadn't happened. Johnny smoothed it over with Midwestern calm, but when the break hit, he'd let the mask slip just enough for the team to see the math: great TV, bad oxygen. And yet the paradox that kept her in rotation remained. When Zaza played, it was irresistible. The flirt with the band, the practiced gasp, the perfectly timed aside that turned the audience into co-conspirators. She could turn 5 minutes into a souvenir. That's why Johnny kept the door cracked even as he tightened the rules. Give her the laugh, don't give her the clock. So the private ledger reads what the tape already proves: unbeatable on camera, unmanageable off it. For the ringmaster of late night, that was the line. Glamour? Always. Nostalgia? Absolutely. But the circus runs on time. With Zaza Gabor, it ran on her time, and on The Tonight Show, there was only one clock that mattered. Shelley Winters, the unpredictable spark with a fuse. 2 Oscars. 7 decades on stage and screen. On paper, Shelley Winters was the perfect late-night guest. In practice, she could turn a quiet studio into a weather front. Shelley doesn't talk, she detonates, Johnny reportedly said. After one turbulent night, she treated a 5-minute anecdote like a runway. Start soft, power up, and suddenly you're at an altitude the rundown didn't plan for. 2 moments tell the story. Mid-70s, sharing the couch with Oliver Reed. The banter curdled, the air went sharp, and Winters calmly lifted her glass, then crowned him with it. The audience gasped. Reed barely blinked. Johnny piloted back to smooth air. Years later, clips still circulate: a producer's dream and a control room ulcer in one booking. Then the 1984 visit with Annie Potts. Winters forgets they've met and worked together, then pivots into a perfect save that brings the room with her. That was Shelley in miniature. Chaos at the top of the breath. Craft by the end of the sentence. Producers prepped differently on Winters nights. Fragile props went missing. Segment borders loosened. Stagehands quietly removed anything throwable. Jokes waited in Johnny's pocket in case a promo turned into politics in 2 beats. Because Winters didn't just have opinions, she deployed them. She could turn a softball into a 5-minute monologue on the state of the world, and Carson, supreme air traffic controller, would hold the glide until the clouds cleared. Here's why Johnny's respect never fully dimmed. The passion was real. Winters wasn't playing firebrand for applause. Long before it was fashionable, she put her body where her beliefs were, showing up at civil rights events, including the Stars for Freedom rally during the Selma to Montgomery March. That same steel that stood in the rain in Alabama stood up for crew and guests when lines were crossed on Johnny's couch. None of this erased the ledger. As the years went on, Carson favored guests whose rhythms matched the show's pulse. Winters still got the invite, because when she landed it was unforgettable television, but the windows narrowed and the guardrails rose. In Johnny's private math, the entry reads exactly like the tape: undeniable talent, combustible delivery, ratings you couldn't deny and oxygen you had to manage. And with Shelley Winters, managing the oxygen was half the job. Joan Crawford, Hollywood royalty, with a studio-chilling stare. When Joan Crawford visited Johnny, America saw the platinum blueprint of old Hollywood. Posture like a ruler, vowels cut from crystal, a smile that could stop a camera dolly mid-roll. She was the first night kind of famous, literally. Crawford sat on the couch for Carson's debut on October 1, 1962, alongside Mel Brooks, Tony Bennett, and Rudy Vallee. From minute one, she helped stamp the show as a meeting place for legends. 2 images tell the offstage story: a lighting memo as thick as a leaflet, and a young PA in tears. The on-air dazzle came with off-air frost. Long before call time, the demands arrived. Angles, gels, shadows. A memo so granular a tech kept it as a curiosity for years. The chair height mattered. Johnny's desk position mattered. The thermostat precisely right mattered. On paper, perfectionism. In practice, power. The room would bend to her or the room would wait. She swept in hours early, her own team in tow, and treated the ecosystem like a set she owned. If you were marquee, she could be courtly. If you were junior, she could be surgical. One young assistant learned it the hard way. A tray of water, the wrong door, and a verbal blade carving the air. The corridor froze. The PA fled in tears. The producer refused to fire her. The tension stayed for the rest of the night. On camera, Crawford was clockwork. Every spontaneous laugh landed on cue. Every anecdote was polished on marble. During breaks, the smile powered down. Stone. Then the red light blinked, and the mask reanimated. Humanity is a switch you could flip. Johnny, who could find common ground with anyone, kept searching for the real person and found only glass. Afterward, he reportedly told Ed, "I've interviewed corpses with more personality." The contradiction only sharpened with time. Crawford still turned up on major talk shows, sparring and smiling through late career chats with Merv Griffin in 1970 and 1971, while promoting My Way of Life. She could charm a room in 3 syllables, but for the people stacking chairs and setting lights, the chill never thawed. Then came the cultural thunderclap. In 1978, Christina Crawford published Mommy Dearest, a memoir that detonated the public image of Joan and launched a decades-long argument about what happened behind closed doors. Friends, colleagues, and 2 of Joan's other adopted daughters rejected the book. Others nodded grimly that the portrait matched the woman they'd glimpsed off stage. Whatever your view, one truth was hard to miss. Her private reputation turned radioactive overnight, and the world began watching Crawford with suspicious new eyes. For Carson, the ledger was simpler and older than the headlines. He graded stars on one unglamorous question: how do they treat the people who can't help them? With Crawford, the arithmetic never balanced. The tape shows the grace. The hallways remembered the chill. She could sell the golden age better than any montage, then step off the riser and make the air 10 degrees colder. In Johnny's private math, the entry never changed: impeccable on camera, impenetrable off it. A queen who could light a studio with a smile and ice it with a glance. Jane Russell, the star whose politics Carson refused to indulge. On paper, Jane Russell was late-night gold. Howard Hughes as Discovery in The Outlaw, Monroe's sparring partner in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, a face that could sell a close-up and a punchline in the same breath. Viewers got glamour with a wink, the statuesque silhouette, the smoky laugh, the effortless volley when Johnny tossed her a setup. On camera, she was a masterclass in classic-era charisma. Backstage was another temperature. Russell's persona didn't stop at glamour. It carried a steel-spined certainty about the world, and according to multiple Tonight Show insiders, it often landed on the people working the show. Carson guarded a politics-light house style. He could tolerate disagreement. What he rejected quietly but firmly was contempt. The friction started small and spread quickly. Staffers recalled non-negotiables that had less to do with lighting and more to do with lines she wouldn't cross. Several accounts say she balked at working with certain crew, including LGBTQ+ staff, and made pointed remarks that chilled the corridor chatter. None of it made air. All of it made the rounds. The audience got the movie star. The crew got the sermon. Then came the booking landmines. Talent coordinators say she resisted sharing an episode with particular guests, most notoriously Rock Hudson, using language that left little doubt about her feelings. Johnny had friends on that staff and in that community. He also had a North Star about basic dignity. inside his studio. Disagreement could be TV. Disparagement was a red line. The night the line hardened, as told by people who were there, didn't happen on camera. During a commercial break in the early 70s, Russell reportedly dismissed civil rights legislation in a tone that carried across the set. No microphones caught it. Enough ears did. Word reached Johnny before the band finished vamping. When the show returned, he was velvet. After the show, he was granite. No speech, no public ban, just a door quietly closed. That was always Carson's way. He rarely blacklisted anyone with real star wattage. Too many constituencies. Too much booking politics. If he drew a hard boundary, it meant the private ledger had turned from pencil to ink. With Russell, the math was simple. Brilliant television when the red light was on, corrosive air when it was off. And the paradox? She could still deliver a segment like few of her generation, flirting with the band, parrying Johnny's feints, breaking into that low, conspiratorial laugh that made a million living rooms feel like the best table at Ciro's. She was funny. She was fast. She knew exactly how to play the camera, because for decades the camera had played her. Cooling the bookings was both easy and cruel. The show lost a surefire pop, the staff lost a stressor. Context only complicated the picture. In later years, Russell embraced outspoken, church-rooted conservatism and family values activism. Admirers called it conviction. Crew who caught the splash called it collateral damage. Carson called it, privately, unnecessary. He didn't need everyone to think alike. He needed everyone to be safe, respected, able to breathe. So the entry in Johnny's ledger reads as both tape and hallway insist. A star who could still stop a room, and a worldview that, when weaponized, stopped the room for the wrong reasons. On The Tonight Show, glamour was welcome, nostalgia cherished, opinions expected, but empathy was the dress code. By the time the credits rolled on Jane Russell's last visit, Johnny had decided she no longer met it. What Carson's blacklist reveals about the wicked world of Hollywood. Johnny Carson's private judgments of 8 marquee names: Frank Sinatra, Bette Davis, Orson Welles, Mickey Rooney, Zsa Gabor, Shelley Winters, Joan Crawford, and Jane Russell, offer a rare, unfiltered glimpse of the machinery behind the spotlight. Johnny saw everything, a longtime producer said. For 30 years, every major star passed through him to reach America. He knew who was genuine and who only played the part. He had nothing to gain by inventing ugliness. Unlike tabloids or disgruntled ex-employees, Carson sat at the peak of the business. Torching relationships would only make his job harder. He wanted smooth shows, easy laughs, happy sponsors. When he disliked someone, it was because they made indifference impossible. Carson separated difficult from dangerous. Eccentricity, nerves, even a healthy ego, those came with the territory. What he couldn't abide was cruelty, especially toward people with less power. His private test, according to his director, was plain. How do they treat the pages, the PAs, the camera operators? That told him everything. Time has validated parts of that ledger. Christina Crawford's allegations about Joan, long-reported stories about Sinatra's proximity to organized crime, accounts of Rooney's boundary-crossing behavior. None of this makes Carson infallible. It does suggest he saw through the varnish long before the public did. The sobering truth: the system insulated stars. Before camera phones and social media, a celebrity could throw a chair or shred an assistant, and if tickets kept selling, the story died in the building. Today, one clip can end a career. A Tonight Show writer observed, "Back then, the facade was a fortress. We look back on the golden age with a warm glow." Carson's quiet blacklist reminds us that glow was often stage lighting. The camera doesn't just add 10 pounds, it adds a layer of fiction. His producer remembered Johnny saying, his greatest gift wasn't just interviewing people, it was seeing through that fiction to the truth underneath. Thank you for watching this dive into Johnny Carson's most difficult guests. If this peek behind late night's golden curtain surprised you, please like the video and subscribe for more deep explorations of entertainment history.